Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Cucchiara, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome in, Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. I realize I'm going to have to full disclosure here up front. It is a new year and I'm trying to get back into this routine of podcasts. I know these people that tuning in or listening later are probably going, yeah, we've heard this before, and I apologize, but I am going to try to get back on track here and do at least once a week. I had such a great following and we still do, so I'm going to continue to try to add that value, education, information. And for that, no better reason to kick off 2023 with my good friend, Jack Russo. He's here with us via Florida and Zoom, how we're using our technology. Jack, remember when we had that great studio, right? And you actually built a studio in your attorney offices as well, and we were all ready to go, and then COVID hit.
Yeah, I mean, the studio is still there, the offices are still there, but just generally speaking, people prefer Zoom because it's so convenient.
Yeah, right.
And judges are taking cases over Zoom, and mediators are handling mediations by Zoom, and negotiations are happening by Zoom, deals are getting done by Zoom. I mean, the world has probably accelerated 10 years
right
as a result of this pandemic. So it's not all bad. I mean, it's not all great, but it's not all bad.
Yeah, no, it's evolving. It's kind of going to ride right into our topic today. The topic Jack and I are going to talk about is the housing system, which in most cases, most people would say it's broken. And we'll kind of, detail that and explain the reason what we're talking about that. But the question is, and the topic we're going to talk about today is, can the 3D printing help fix this? Most people know housing's kind of out of control in anywhere. It used to be, and I know Jack will echo this, it used to be that, California, to a certain extent, New York, maybe Florida, but California, New York, there was always expensive places in the middle. It seemed like the middle of the country was always a safe place to go. Housing was more affordable, and that's changed. So you're talking about Colorado, Texas, some of these places, it's no longer the case where you could go and get a nice home for $200,000 anymore. Remember that? That wasn't too long ago. You could go to middle America and do that.
I remember years ago, many years ago, my parents built an add-on garage in Brooklyn, New York. Mm-hmm. And they paid the person who did the mason work, essentially the brick by brick completion of this brick garage.
Right.
It's like a 2-car garage. Basically, it was like $1 or so per concrete block.
Wow.
And I don't know whether the blocks added up to like 500 blocks or 1,000 blocks, but let's call it even 2,000 blocks.
Right.
They built the garage for like $2,000. I think it was far less than that. You couldn't build that garage today for less than probably $50,000 for what they got. And, that's the reality of the cost of labor, mm-hmm. more than the materials. I think the materials have gone up as well, but the cost of labor has so skyrocketed that it was only inevitable that we'd see somebody use computer-based automation to finally build a way to actually allow houses to be printed.
Right.
And there's YouTubes all over the place. Maybe we should show one, but I don't know that you publish your stuff on YouTube too.
Yeah, typically I need to start doing that, but typically it's just been the audio, but we're going to start publishing on YouTube next week. So it might not be a bad idea to bring that up. And so as people do visualize this, they could go ahead and take a look. But most people, as we're pulling those videos up, realize that you've heard of 3D printing for some time, but like anything else, it's evolving and it's getting better and better. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jack, I think the big deal about this recent one was that this was the first 2-story. Is that right? I believe.
Yeah. And there's definitely YouTubes that have gotten many, many views. And I'll see if you give me the share screen, I can bring up just to visualize for the two of us. And then obviously the YouTube version of this podcast will show. And you go on YouTube and just type in, 3D printing of houses, right, and you'll get the top listed versions.
Right.
And if you look at it, it's really quite a statement about how far automation is taking things, because this is all like computer-based driven robots is really a way to think of it. So I'll put this on the screen, Joyce.
Yeah, perfect. That's great.
And we'll play just a minute of it just to kind of get our juices going. You could see the nozzle is just printing, and everyone's looking at it.
Director of 3D printing at Outpost. We focus on printing homes that are affordable in the community and for the people in the area. We range from 1,500 square feet and 1,300 for our single family. We use large scale construction 3D printers to be able to create affordable housing.
Wow, that's amazing.
I mean, they're doing with concrete.
So on site.
Yeah, I mean, they're showing it.
Yeah.
Footing, and what we do is we set the printer up around where the house can go. So we typically have around 5 or 6 pieces of equipment, and that is printer. And we also have a control panel to operate and monitor the print settings. Then on the material side, we have a silo which holds the dry material, and directly below that we have a mixing system and a pumping system. The water's added in that process and pumped through a hose, which then feeds the printer material.
Wow. I mean, for those that aren't familiar, this is just really, when you think about it, it sounds funny, but it's as Jack mentioned, off after the podcast or before, feel free to go on YouTube and enter any of those. But what is funny to me is that if you could visualize this huge, like, let's say your little HP printer sitting in your office and it's, a little 8x10 or whatever your little printer is. If you could imagine scaling that a couple of thousand times, really, it's kind of unique, right? It looks pretty similar.
Yeah. I mean, you could say that the machinery that prints out circuit boards.
Right.
I mean, there's machinery that prints out microprocessors and memories, semiconductors in very small spaces. And then you could say there's stuff that prints out circuit boards, larger versions of circuits. This is like an extension of those computer-aided design, also known as CAD programs.
Right.
The machinery is just much bigger. And instead of the microcircuit being done in whatever material is used for microcircuits, it's using concrete, and it's using typical construction techniques that construction workers are all just looking around, making sure the machine is running properly, but the machine is doing all the work.
Right.
And it's eliminating a huge number of laborers who would otherwise be mixing the concrete, moving the concrete, pouring the concrete, smoothing the concrete. And so you could say to yourself, what they've done is it's a little bit like if you look in any neighborhood, the trash gets picked up. Most of it is an automated pickup, not totally automated, but it's automated with a forklift kind of picking up the cans, and all that heavy back work isn't done. So there's often just one driver of the truck, and they're going to get rid of the driver next. Right. They're going to say the truck can be run by automated programming that just goes through the neighborhood and automates the pickup. So,
this is really moving in the right direction. For those that there's always the people that, it's great, but it's so expensive, it's so far away. But I would say that, and Jack, you could speak to this even more, that the acceleration of AI, artificial intelligence and technology and evolution and software is accelerated at a point now where, 10, 15 years ago, I'll just give an example. I'll see what you think, Jack. Like if we were 10, 15, let's say we were 15 years ago and we were talking about this and it was just a thought, it might take 5, 6, 7 years to even get the thought to access. But I guess the point I'm trying to make, maybe you could articulate it better, is, this is going to move a lot quicker in the next 3 to 4 years than it would have 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, there's no question that people now see that it can be actualized, and it's producing actual homes that people like.
Right.
The way you could say people like an electric car years ago, 30 years ago, when GM came out with the first electric car, there were people that were like, who wants an electric car? And how long is it going to, batteries going to last? Like there's all sorts of infrastructure issues. There weren't places to charge it. Now you have actual examples of, in this case, low-cost housing being done at a much lower cost basis.
Mm-hmm.
People are starting to get religion that this is a new world and it's acceptable. I mean, my parents years ago, whenever they heard about something that was prefabricated or a prefabricated house, they'd say, that's for trailer trash. That's not for us. And, there were probably people that couldn't afford anything under a trailer home. Right. People in America. I saw a statistic today, Joe, that plays into the work you do in financing.
Uh-huh.
It was from somebody who's pretty famous saying 70% of Americans wouldn't be able to come up with $4,000 to deal with a $4,000 sudden expense.
That's scary.
And then it was something like 30% of Americans couldn't come up with even $400.
Yeah, I that doesn't surprise me. It's alarming. It's scary. And I think you're probably right. I remember for years in the studies and the data that I collected that, and it still alarms me that they say that even less than, I think 10% of the population will ever be ready to retire on a normal. That's scary.
Well, it just means the government has to trend, the federal government has to trend more socialistically, which they've been doing for a while.
Right.
And that trend of basic income, because they're not going to let people starve. And, people are going to sort of say, I've got to get a basic income to cover basic needs. So there'll be more of a push for lowering the cost of housing, because that means you can produce more housing, particularly in areas that need more housing. I mean, the real estate is there. America is blessed with a lot of real estate. We have a lot of unused real estate. And then we have a lot of even big city real estate that's sort of in need of being replaced. Probably, I would say, people will correct me, but I bet there's 50% of homes in San Francisco that really are not worth repairing anymore.
Right.
A high number, but they're dilapidated. Yeah. They don't meet code. It would cost too much to fix them. This automated tool, I don't know how you could automate the demolition, but basically this automated tool could slot in. You could see from the video, it just slots into a relatively small space.
Well, we not only have a sense of urgency to bring the cost down and make this more realistic, but I think, the part I want to talk about too is I think there's a big push towards going green. Let's face it, right? What's good for the world? What's good for the ecosystem? What's good for the environment? I've always been amazed to this day why we still use so much wood when people say, we're trying to save the trees. So in this case, using cement, metal, I don't know. To me, I haven't done the study behind it, but I'm guessing it's got to be better for our environment. Yeah,
ultimately, the green movement is here to stay.
Right.
The automation movement is here to stay. The use of lower cost materials is here to stay. The reduction of labor is definitely here to stay. Mm-hmm. The only real question becomes, can the stigma be removed? And I think for younger people, there's no sense of stigma.
I agree with you.
Younger people like my daughters, if someone said, hey, we can print a house for you, it'll be maybe 1/3 of the price of what it would take for that same 1,500 square 3-bedroom, 2-bath house to be square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house to be done on the same lot. She's going to go, they're going to go for it. They're not going to want to be saddled with a big mortgage. This has trickling effects in so many other ways, because that mentality of not being saddled to a very, very high mortgage, just like not being saddled to student debt, not being saddled to car payments. We're seeing this. I know for a lengthy period of time, my daughters, who are now in their 30s, Actually, Danielle was just 40, just had her 40th birthday. They would Uber. They wouldn't want to buy a car. They wouldn't want to lease a car. They were like, I have an iPhone. I can call up a car at any time. It's much less expensive than paying for the insurance and the maintenance and the tires and the repairs and the gasoline. I mean, they go through a list. They're right.
Yeah.
And I think more and more we'll see that, Joe.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. Well, it's remarkable. I know you and I both have a passion and a connection with advancement, technology, and evolution, how things are changing the world. And this is just another example, of course, in the business that I'm in real estate and real estate financing and bundle select and what we're trying to do with that. Simplify, bring down the cost, this whole process of real estate, that the fact that you could do a 3D home now. And I don't know, did we get as far to see? It'd be interesting. I'm not sure. Were you able to catch, or did they disclose what that might cost today, or they don't really know yet?
I think they do, but it's later in the video. If you want,
okay.
I could put it back up. I think it's later in the video, and I think it's about 70% off what the cost would be if they use normal labor, normal tools, normal non-automation.
Wow, that's amazing. And then
it's a big cut.
Yeah. So what's amazing about that, I know there's an capital investment in all I get that with the machinery and all that, but so you have to believe as we evolve in the next several years, those costs will come down, and that 70% is going to get better, right?
Over time, I would think that the tools in volume, it's a little bit like Tesla cut the price of its electric cars, and people got all worried. And their argument was, we're going to make it up in volume.
Yeah.
And, they certainly ended up issuing a great quarterly report and what others would say was sort of a mediocre quarter, because they said, look, we're the leading brand and we're going to keep the lead and we're going to cut with volume. And that's the normal mentality of how goods end up really becoming kind of a major force. That is, right. Production methods increase, costs get cut, spreading of costs occurs over a larger number of units. And I have a friend who likes to say, the cost of mobility, as in, getting around town, is heading to zero. Like, that's a really radical statement to say that the cost of mobility is heading to zero. I mean, I don't think it's going to get to zero anytime in our lifetimes or anyone's lifetime. But the argument is that you're not putting gasoline in a car, and if solar really kicks in and wind farms and other things that produce energy at a much lower cost, essentially you are transporting folks at a much lower per mile cost. And that's a big change in economics.
I think the other piece that's conducive to this technology, Jack, is again, the studies, I study this stuff every day, is that more and more people, even us, baby boomers and a little bit older and certainly younger, the importance of this huge monstrosity, $13,000, or I should say 13,000 square foot home, are going to become more and more obsolete. I mean, I know those will always be available for the people with, unlimited money, but the trend that we're seeing is that even our generation is really looking to downsize and simplify. One story, all that type of stuff that we're seeing now, I think is going to become more of a trend. And to your point, certainly our children are not going to be interested in these monster homes. I don't think.
Right. Look, there's a whole movement called the tiny home movement.
Yeah, right.
Before, where you literally do have a home that can be on a hitch and wheels pulled away. And it's not an RV, and it's not meant to be an RV, but it's meant to be a home that is, and I think obviously these are all also mainly prefabricated in a factory, but they're designed to basically roll into place and they can be rolled out. So if you decide that, hey, I'm fed up with this part of town, you lease some sort of plot of land, the way you could say trailer homes did it, and then you take it out. Now, I think what's actually happened is there are situations where parents don't want their kids living in the house, but they say, hey, I'll get you a tiny home, and because it's cheaper than, say, building an auxiliary dwelling unit. Mm-hmm. And, if things work out great, you can be in the backyard in the tiny home. But if things don't work out, you have to roll away with your tiny home to some other location. So, there's a range of dwellings that are far different than the traditional tract homes that I suppose were a big part of the baby boom that happened, and a big part of post-World War II return of soldiers in America and the creation of households.
Right.
So we're seeing a very different world. And I think we'll continue to see it. And you're right. More automation applies, the lower costs get produced, more improvements occur. It's inevitable.
Yeah. I think the next problem we need to solve, and we're working on that too, is that we could do it in our industry, is that how do you develop a better function for helping people save for a home so it's more functional, it's more practical. You could have other people contribute. There's some things in the works right now we're working on that, because that's a big barrier too, especially as home costs go up. Let's face it, just coming up with the down payment, unless you're fortunate enough to, have some parents or grandparents that you get some money, and or you're one of those small percentage that land some big deals with an IPO or something. I mean, it's difficult to come up with that initial down payment.
I said this to someone today, and I'll say it here again. I think in America, the moment that a child is born, the government should punch out a 529 plan and put $100 in it as sort of the startup nest egg, as a matching fund to what the parents put in.
Right.
And the idea is you get the mentality of tax-free savings, accumulation over time, investment over time. And then the kicker would be, look, you can use it for education, you can use it for college, you can use it for graduate school, you can use it for lifelong education. But if you want to make a first down payment on a first home, you can take it out for that.
I would 100% agree. Yeah. Right.
So that 20-year period, let's call it a 21-year period on the view that people take gap years and take some time off. Any set of stocks, any set of decent stocks, even an index on the stock market, assuming that the American system continues to work the way we think it should work, you're going to see some big multiplier happen on what would be scheduled regular investments by parents initially, and then eventually, from summer jobs and other things that people do. To me, it's like a no-brainer, and it should be part of the American culture, but it just hasn't taken hold. Like, it's just not part of the American mentality. You can optionally do it, but there are a lot of parents that aren't even that familiar with 529 plans, even as they have kids. They know about changing diapers. They don't really know about planning the future for your child.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is exciting technology, and it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. You and I both know people that are doing the kind of the modular smart homes and in-factory homes, and I think the market there's a place for that in the market. But it'll be interesting to see how, let's just call it this race around the evolutionary track, if you will. Who's got the lead now, and if that lead will change places, almost like a horse race when you're looking at the modulars versus the technology regarding the 3D printing.
Right. I think there'll be a range, and there'll be a set of outcomes around that range, and then there'll be an adoption, and may the best person win out of this. I don't think it'll be the tiny homes as much as people want to believe they can kind of live in 400 square feet.
Yeah.
I don't think, particularly in a COVID period, unless you have a great outdoors and a large, sort of a large terrace you can get out to.
Yeah.
The odds are 400 square feet for two people, or even one person for that matter. There is actually a minimum in New York City. I want to say it's like 350 square feet studio.
Yeah.
It's like the minimum size for a legal dwelling unit. There are people that obviously do all sorts of stuff in New York. subdivide studios. They do all kinds of stuff. But at the end of the day, the reality is that you do need a certain amount of space to feel like it's habitable.
Yeah.
Probably just about 400 square feet for one person, maybe two on the outside.
Yeah. Well, 3D printing is here to stay. It's exciting that it's going to continue to really accelerate forward. And but before we kind of finish up, I want to touch two things, Jack. I mean, you've been in Florida now has it been over a year, 2 years almost?
Yeah. I mean, look, I came out because my mom was in trouble. My brother was very ill. It's a long story, but short version of it is COVID was happening and they were getting ill. And, reality in California is California was under siege from fires. Now it seems to be under siege from floods. I mean, I still get back to California, and the reality of the situation is that I'm also licensed in Florida. I took the Florida bar, passed the Florida bar. I mean, I've been licensed in New York since almost right after California, decades, and in other states as well. It's becoming a multi-state practice. It's becoming a national practice for lawyers, and it's becoming, you have people all over the place. I mean, we have people all over the United States, and they do things. So it's acceptable. Now, whether or not it's going to be the total future, it's clear that big firms are cutting their real estate. Mm-hmm. They're not really even issuing offices anymore. They're issuing hotel keys. Right. So it's a different world, and it's operating on a different set of principles. Yeah. I don't know where that will all lead. There's obviously a lot of commercial real estate in big cities that are not being used. Right. Well, I don't know if that can continue and how long that can continue. You keep your area keeps getting flooded by New York and all other states. So ironically, you went out there before this major push because you were taking care of your mom and your brother. And ironically, the next couple of years, boy, you've got a flood of people coming into Florida. And so I know that is affecting the pricing there. Give us a little quick synopsis of what the Florida real estate's like and how you see that in the next couple of years. I think that people here are gobbling up Florida real estate. They obviously worry about hurricanes because there is a hurricane season. They worry about climate change because if you're too close to either the ocean on the east side or the Gulf on the west side, you worry about rising water tides and the like. Right. Overall, I would say that the prices have moved up pretty dramatically. Now, recently, I think they've become more flat. Not as flat as, say, maybe California has become. I think California has suffered some degradation. Now, there's some differences in different markets depending on where you are. And overall, I would say that people feel as though they're worried, particularly with all these layoffs, that maybe we're going into a real recession, hard recession. Right. And one that's reminiscent of what happened in 2008. And real estate really took a turn for the worse then. There were a lot of foreclosures. It almost feels like that whole cycle of foreclosures was just getting resolved as we moved into COVID in 2020. Yeah. It's part of the cycle, right? Yeah, I do. And my take before we leave too is on that is I think the recession is going to be real, and I think it hasn't hit us as hard as it's going to. And I also think that because we don't have the kind of the mortgage meltdown effect this time around, but here's what I do believe. I believe that markets that were imploded with second homes and investment properties are going to get hit. I don't, because there's no kind of funny lending anymore, you could argue that it's even more conservative. I don't see a broader market drop off, but I do see, and I see it already in Montana, Nevada, Arizona, places that were flooded with second homes and rental properties. When someone gets in trouble, the last property to go is going to be their primary residence. Right. So that will put pressure on the market where the Idahos and the Montanas and the Vegases and some of these places were just flooded
with second homes and rental property. That's my belief. So we'll see what happens.
Right. I mean, I totally agree with you, Joe. I think when you see a softness in the market, the first thing to go is the summer house, the vacation property.
Yeah.
Now, Airbnb changed that to some degree, VRBO, because you could sustain something as a temporary rental depending on where it is.
Mm-hmm.
But, there's a lot of expense to maintaining a house, even if you have a flow of vacationers coming in and out of it. Yes, you have some income, but there's a lot of expense. And for many couples, they can't sustain it. So,
well, and remember that we'll just do a quick summary here. And I know that we lived it and I follow this every day, is that there was a lot of funny money going around the last 5 or 6 years. Technology could do nothing wrong. The stock market could do nothing wrong. Interest rates earned 2%. And people were having a 24-hour day party, buying real estate, thinking, I don't have to work anymore. And I got all this money and my portfolio looks great. And I tell you, that has all not only changed overnight, but now you're seeing high tech lay off for the first time since 2008.
Right. And people's perceptions are not as frothy.
Right.
They're not in that sort of zany sense of everything's perfect. I mean, you've got a war going on between Russia and the Ukraine. You've got China threatening the invasion of Taiwan.
Yep.
You've got Israel bombing places in Palestine. I mean,
I know.
So many different things playing out in the news that make for negativity.
Right.
And then, of course, all the layoffs. And you say to yourself, people are worried.
Yeah.
And it's almost like if a recession doesn't happen in a big way, it'll be a big surprise.
Yeah, I agree.
A really big, happy surprise if it doesn't.
Yeah, I would agree.
But right now, it just doesn't look to me as though we're going to see anything for the next 2 years other than sort of a down cycle. Now, maybe people would call it a correction.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, the question is, can we grow a stronger base? Now, maybe all these automation tools do precisely that. But remember, they displace people.
Right.
They create unemployment. I mean, the latest we can end with this, because we should do a separate show about this, is ChatGPT.
Oh, I want to do another show about that. I've been reading up on that lately. Amazing.
It's changing the way in which
Amazing.
we think about getting knowledge work. I mean, is the price of knowledge work now heading to zero as well?
Yeah, we'll tease the audience here. We're going to do a show on this if we can with our time next week. It would be interesting. That's a great topic. I've been doing some research on. It's amazing.
It's a great topic, and it's one that's going to persist over time because we're going to see GPT apply in law. We're going to see ChatGPT apply in marketing. We're going to see it apply in real estate lending, in general lending, in banking. It's essentially going to be like a virtual assistant for knowledge workers until it gets so smart that it displaces the knowledge worker that was using it.
Well, I think most people would be surprised, Jack. Yeah, let's do that next week. But most people would be surprised, but a lot of the blogs that you guys are reading right now, I don't want to surprise you or burst your bubble, but that's AI. A lot of the blogs that people are reading right now.
A lot of the marketing stuff that people, same thing.
Yeah.
Look, the New York Times did a layoff. I think the Washington Post did a layoff. Why? A lot of the news gets generated automatically and makes its way to the newspaper with much fewer people writing words or editing words or revising words. Yeah.
Well, before we go, remind everybody how they can get a hold of you if they need your services, legal services. You're in many different states, and you're still give us an idea how they could reach you.
Sure. Computer Law Group is www.computerlaw.com. Computer and the word law strung together.com. J Russo, JRUSSO at computerlaw.com is the email. And then the office number is 650-327-9800. I mean, in general, I'd say the practice has expanded over time.
Yeah.
The reality is the pricing at big firms continues to increase, and that's made it more difficult for the kinds of businesses and startups and growth companies we represent, as well as individuals, to get help and provide help to those people at a reasonable price.
Right. Well, we'll pick up that new topic next week. It was always good seeing you, Jack. I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, you're doing well. I'm glad to see you, Joe. Take care.
All right. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Thanks again for tuning in. Our guest, Jack Russo, always a great guest with a lot of great knowledge. We will try to do this next week and talk about the new evolution of the more technology that's happening, artificial intelligence, which is really taking a stronghold. Until then, you need to reach me, 408-838-9060. Again, 408-838-9060. If I could help you with any lending needs, real estate needs, anything, CPA, financial planners, we have a whole group of people to help you with anything and everything real estate. Until next time, take care.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.